Julie here with Sirius Dallas Moon, ascendant 5 degrees Leo. So our Saturn day sun is 25 degrees Aquarius. And, well, midheaven 28 degrees Aries. Um, I want to talk about a thought experiment. And this is Da Vinci in the war economy and war weapon production. Now, you have what I'm about to say. I understand nothing in that because I really didn't do that before. All I remember is that when I learned about Da Vinci, he paid very close attention. He wanted to sustain himself as an artist, and he was designing structures that could be used for war as well as weapon. I don't agree with the weapon he produced, but he also made use for peace. And this prompted my thinking because this young gentleman prompted me to press record, quoting, of course, Mark Rutte that said, Europe cannot defend itself without the United States, and he meant a weapon. And so he basically begins to explain how Russia turned to war economy, producing so much weapon and millions of workers in the weapon industry. And my very first thought was, well, they are not planning for peace. Not in the sense of, oh, we need to beware from Russia as an enemy at war, but actually the other way around. War is a temporary state. However, when we have millions of people for whom the only working sector without easy adaptability to peace is weapon production, we are basically abolishing the ability to sustain peace economy. And my thinking, because we have Neptune in Aries, which is the holistic view of war, because I've already predicted what this war would be about, because it is a Mars sign, and with Mars, economicity is important. It's not about how much we have. Also, Saturn is going to create delays in weapon production, delays to innovation, but also innovation that stand the test of time. What goes through the threshold of Saturn into production will stand the test of time. So when we think about war, a lot of the times we think about basically to neutralize attack or to neutralize life or to de-life, to unalive. And to exterminate, unfortunately, a lot of war strategies are done with to humiliate, which always backfires. We would not have Germany's Nazi party without the juxtaposition of Germany finishing First World War without enemy soldiers in German land, and the 300 years of humiliation that were wars on the land of Germany by other peoples, kind of like what's happening in Syria. So when we think about war, is usually about asserting our sovereignty and having the resources, energy resources, rare earth mineral resources needed to sustain sovereignty without being looted. Okay, so now one major thing that I already identified is, of course, zero rape, zero slavery economy. Because when somebody, for example, at night upon Saturn ingress, I went through something that resulted in my sexual boundaries being violated. Then what happens immediately? I eat more than I would otherwise eat. I consume more than I would otherwise consume. I'm enraged. I make a cup of coffee. I put 2 cups of coffee to my mother that drinks barely 1 cup of coffee. I dissociate. Okay, already things that, and later the backlash is that to align, I basically begin to almost sadistically describe the emotional effect of rape, manifest with the cult the death of all acts of rape. And this is just one day timestamp of how those things cause something that doesn't produce, is not productive, it's in excess, it goes through the tether tather and all the things that they teach in the occult, but the occult is rape based. So that is so because this war, I strongly feel, and Neptune in Aries was abolitionist time, so this is about zero slavery. Zero slavery is zero rape, and zero rape is zero slavery. This is something that we need to focus, because we're not going to have time to produce in mass when it comes to weapon, and to train intelligence without rape, to train to embody, train to embodiment. And so it is completely antithetical thinking to the normal of weapon production and war strategy. Because I know, at least for example in IDF, they make Zumbu rituals where people rape one another and so on and so forth. So they definitely go into chaos when they go to war. But what they call balagan. But the side effect is that they come back from the war, they rape. They come back from the war, they're war criminals. And I saw by a Nitin Cold lady that is the same in U.S. military. Now, every military, U.S. is already NATO alliance, military that sends its soldiers to NATO alliance, this is big problem. Because enough for one country to send soldiers that are trained in this way to NATO, all NATO is already virally infected. Now let's also think about the big weapon. The big weapon is already made. Okay? The weapon that nobody wants to use is already made. So that's not needed to produce. Again, I'm not saying they're not going to reproduce and so on. And it's already made to the point that, how should I say that? If they throw half, there is still half. So now the big question is wealth redistribution. Having no country feeling left out of sovereignty or humiliated, which is very difficult to sustain with the current military and war strategy training. Not having to throw the weapon that nobody wants to use, because we already, it's not experimental, we already know the side effect. By now, we already, before they declare war, they already know the side effect of the weapons. And now, what are the outer, what is in Mars now? So we already have Saturn. Saturn is bone, skin, teeth, and we want to make sure that weapon production is not going to be used later in our bone, skin, teeth. Okay, you think about fluoride. Because it's going to violate our sovereignty and sense of self. Okay? The antidote is neurodivergent people that cannot do slavery and are hypersensitive and also, with neurodivergent, I'm a little bit like that too. We don't get clues. So you cannot gaslight them because they don't even understand this type of communication. Saturn is also about aging. So we want to make sure that our production is not going to result in people aging more quickly. Again, going back to the minerals. What minerals are we looting for? If we are looting for, let's say, oil and gas, then, again, I'm not saying we can do completely without or anything like that, but if we are looting for oil and gas, basically, let's say the Arctic. Okay, we killed salamans. So we have oil and gas, but no food. And then the food that there is aging us quickly, which would cause us to overconsume and to enter war cycle, because we don't know to run peace economy, we only know to run war economy. The only way to run peace economy is sovereignty. Aries war is about bringing to sovereignty-based economy. And Aries is individual. Saturn is ruling over Pluto in Aquarius, scientific revolution. The ingress is with Pluto at the degree 4, which is foundation, and the people can result in mandatory army recruitment to the people, but also there is scientific revolution, and common people, they ask the questions, and they can even use astrology to do thought experiments. There's nothing more Saturn ruling over Pluto in Aquarius, with Saturn being in Aries, sign of the mind, Aquarius, scientific revolution, science, astrology, that says thought experiment regarding to war, weapon, and weapon production. Saturn Neptune gives us the dual use of weapon. The potential, what we innovate right now, if we set the mind that it will be sustaining to peace and to war, okay, like Da Vinci. He created bridges because in times of war they could transport, okay, weapons or cars or vehicles carrying weapons, and also created some vehicles. But also in times of peace they could transport goods. Also in time of war they transport goods. It's just a security to the goods. But so this type of thinking is very supported by Neptune. And Neptune, we also think about the first frontier of medicine. Not about causing a lot of amputated limbs like there was in Sedna Ingress to Gemini during the Israel-Palestine war. Excess amputation of limbs. Of course, it's used in some way, and then there are innovations and so on, but the innovations contain chips that the person that, let's say, has a bionic limb, this limb is basically belonging to something that can hack into their own body, and that violates sovereignty. So technology, definitely technology that negates the technology that violates sovereignty. I know that this is not the origin of why a lot of the war strategy was planned. However, basically, if in the Second World War, before the First World War, nobody talked about voting. After the Second World War, women got right to vote. I mean, Charles Montesquieu, but other than that, Charles Montesquieu did not even conceive that women could vote, because women was like, it's like my cat can vote in the election. It's not that they were hated in as much as they were seen as either pets or something that doesn't even have its own consciousness. And if it does, it's like nature. Okay, court nature, and she will reveal her secret to you. So woman was either the mythical, and then of course there were misogynists and so on. But this, we already got a suffragist, we already got women having their own economy. What is this one about? Zero rape, which is not only for women. In fact, this is a Mars sign. It's killing the rapist, but it's also the rapists in the brotherhoods, the militaries, between old and younger men, apprenticeships, because Saturn and Mars, and even the science. But here, by the way, very accentuated is the topic of, it's killing all rape, but it's not saint feminism. The aftermath can result in another feminist wave. And this is what I'm saying. Logically, although it's not designed, the wars are not designed by feminists, they result in another feminist wave, bigger than the one before. Okay, if in the past all women were raped in marriage, outside marriage, then they came up with the pill. It's like they were raped anyway, at least they could control birth. But then they say, oh, this is actually because of ritual abusers and so on and so forth. Yes, but there is no fertility that is authentic if it is rape based. Okay, all the forms of, the bull's skin or whatnot that they were using in French letters, I don't know. It was all necessitating that people will not rape. Now, knowing that already eliminates a lot of things that prevent, let's say, Europe to sovereignly protect itself. Now let's try to think concretely. Neptune rules waves, and in Art of War, there's two, not all, but there's definitely all that is done, depending on the school of, yes, but all that is done to bring back the energy to the earth, to alchemy, to center people, because it is believed that a sovereign sense of self, sovereign, healthy, thriving person doesn't get into war. Okay, let's say, I don't know, China has more rare earth minerals than Europe. In normal situation, Europe says, okay, we can do some refineries for you, China, and have dividends from the minerals. China said, amazing, they can take a little bit of the workload, and we get minerals. All is working well. Enough for everyone. No need to go to war. Okay, how does economy usually works? You have 5 apples, I have 3 goats. These goats are all women goats. Do you know anybody have male goats? Well, if they are going to like one another, maybe we'll have some babies, but maybe we'll have excess milk to use. Then we can make, I don't know, goat cheese. I say, okay, I have 3 apples, I don't know who to give them. Here, take one, and let's go together. Let's look if somebody has male goats. Normally, economy works like this. It's only when there was rape or molestation where people begin to cook what was it today? A pot of potatoes and eat all the potatoes. And what? If they're not raped, they don't have that, because the minerals are absorbed and there is peace. So art of war is always meant to create peace. Now, if somebody is coming headstrong to attack, then the thinking is basically to use from the energy, but to bring it back to equilibrium. With the minimal amount of harming them. Why? We don't want to over decentralize the system. Okay? Pay attention how different it is from what you see in war zones. And this is because of what you saw in Epstein files. But it's the cloning project, ritual abuse, and people hoarding more than they need and not enjoying that because of rape and violence. So if I would think about developing a weapon, I would think what would be the waves and the frequencies that immediately set, let's say, if I could play frequency to enemy, that would immediately get them into a state of centering and peace. If I could get, because my enemy is trained to go into balagan, I can think about when we were in open apartments. There was a guy, and he was drunk as fuck. Began to be violent. Somebody let them smell coffee, black coffee, and they gave them black coffee. Then he came to his senses. I was shit fuck scared. Then he came to his senses, and because we were doing like a raid or not a raid, a parade or something, um, and he was messing with everything. So they gave him to smell some coffee, and then they gave him to drink coffee, and fortunately he came back to his senses, and then we could do this parade. So basically, the enemy is coming with frequency of big mess, big house, but the enemy is coming destabilized. The enemy is usually entering this psychosis state of attack. They try to be the most crazy in the crime scene. But the aftermath is such trauma that lasts for generations over nothing. Now, root cause, there are many lineages that sacrifice the people. And until this root cause is not addressed, all these lineages are at very big risk. Because if it has accumulated to wartime in Aries, it's about killing the rapists. And ritual sacrifice, or even human sacrifice, is the same logic of rape. It's trying to enslave something, to bend something over to the will of people, over the will of other people. Usually done from state of helplessness, but when that helplessness becomes tradition, and this is Saturn Neptune, then we have complete lineages that die. And this can also be molestation, rape, and so on and so forth in the lineages. So we need to align the frequencies. And Neptune is about frequency, wave-based. Pluto in Aquarius means we are addressing the nervous system. People, the enemy is coming with toxic nervous system. And what it needs is centered nervous system. It's counterintuitive because we think that a happy, regulated enemy is more competent in attacking us, but it actually has no reason to. Okay? Another thing is new structures and old structures. Instead of thinking, will our peace structure sustain us at war? What if we think about, will our war structure sustain us at peace? The architecture, uh, Aquarius is architecture. What is architecture that sustains sovereignty the best? And we want to think about the structure. And this is real estate of banking, because Saturn, that is orchestrated to maintain a frequency, Neptune, of individual sovereignty on sense of self and nervous system. Again, that's and but those structures can sustain us at peace. First of all, everybody that enters the building enters into peace. If you want to make, for example, zero usury bank, this thinking is also of the architecture that would sustain, because we are rejuvenating what was set in stone. We can't win this war with anything that is the residue of rate-based mindset. Um, more things. Well, of course, outer planets also refer to culture. Again, we can't win this war with rape culture. And if it is one, then what is happening is going to be something that undermines itself. Okay? Second World War, Rockefeller said, I will tax women too. Now again, I don't know if this is what Rockefeller really thought, or, okay, but that's how he explained it. He was living in also atmosphere of, and he had extortion cult because he had to consolidate wealth with monarchies. So he had to speak many languages of power. By the way, a little bit of myth busting. A lot of people say what's happening with the Epstein files is the elite and so on and so forth. Listen to Douglas McIntyre. And understand that those things originate from tribal, okay, from tribal origins. It's how they train sometimes even the shamans and the healers. Or the chiefs of society. Yes, it's not nice to hear that, it's not nice to face that. But I know my mother would never let me next to my grandfather. He survived the entire Holocaust. 14 people died. His brothers, his sisters, his parents. He was my age at the time of Holocaust. Not nice to say that. I wish there was easier way to discontinue rape lineages in the family. Not nice to confront that. Can prevent the Holocaust. And then I find out that the people that made the Holocaust are basically, they were Jews trafficking Jews, and they traded to Hitler. Now, what is traded to Hitler? They would get Hitler on camera. They wanted what? Country for Jews. Okay. And then extorted him, looted the money. Voila. Until today, is such called activates, is active in Israel. If you go feminist organizations in Israel, completely castrated. No, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. The lady that brought down a madame, Israeli madame, had 52 brothels. Nobody helped her. Israel loved saying 7th of October, where were the feminists of the world? And by the way, it's not wrong. But where was the feminists of Israel? When a lady brought down a madame, and this woman is, I think, not even 50. That 52 brothels were in the most Orthodox Jewish, because they would make them religious on purpose, just like in other religions. Not nice to say that, not nice to address that. How did they make 7th October? For example, guy rapes in Thailand, that is on tape, and they say, okay, do this, do this, do that. Tomorrow, Israel, war criminal. And there were people trying to prevent it, but they were threatened, and some of them were kidnapped. So these are the challenges that any army has. And this is basically challenges of those lineages and those cultures that can bring big war. And within that context, indeed, Europe has no chance protecting itself outside the United States, but also with United States. And in that case, it would be even if it win or lose, something will undermine itself until it's zero rape society. People say, no, it's utopia. If somebody would have told you that, basically, it would be worldly forbidden to have child labor. Not enforced? I know it's not enforced. But several centuries ago, nobody even thought about this as a law. Definitely not a global law. Maybe only when Neptune was in Aries. But then there were also what? Colonialism. So, continuing the thought experiment, what could sustain? We definitely want nervous system regulating that is not controlling from the outside, but aligning into basically the organic frequencies. Um, because we need to address Saturn Neptune. We will have to appease Saturn Neptune conjunction to have the weapon, whether even if it's from United States. Weapon being shipped to Europe, boom. Who did it? Off the radar. Not impossible. Who did it? Oh, they mixed the identity so that they would think it's United States did it to United States. Now what? Have to have more weapon, more money. It's extortion. It's extortion. How did they close traffic in place in Romania during COVID? Yes, the police asked for so much bribe that it was no longer economic. So how create world peace? Well, such extortion of the weapon industry. If anybody, Schindler's, that can be. If we need Schindlers on all fronts and all frontiers, but zero without the human trafficking, because if Schindler sent the espionage to Hitler, it was not to prevent the war. Espionage, their role is to extort, but to extort it was not to save people. It was to create concentration camps. Okay, people mythicize sexpionages. If somebody is trained by rape, first of all, they train them by rape. They train them by rape. Rape always undermines itself because rape is negation of sense of self. This is why what is done through rape will always undermine itself. If somebody is raped, then, how should I say that? Even if somebody is raped by being people pleasing, it will always undermine itself. Now, other than architecture, particularly to military basements, and when we talk about military basements, we're basically thinking, now a lot of people will be immediately thinking settlements. I'm thinking about the architecture, and you know what, whether settlement or not, because if that is settlement, it would be returned in time of peace, and then the people that will live there will live in architecture that support individual sovereignty and safe nervous system. Okay, for example, let's say, I don't know, Israel, Palestine, let's say instead of a digital death camp or concentration camp in Rafah, where the Israelis actually stamped state of Palestine. I don't think Israeli built that, but definitely Israelis tried to trade the building material to make business. But let's say instead of that, they would build nervous system regulating structures that are structured and attuned to have good temperature that supports the individual regulated systems. It means every person has, let's say, their own room, their own bathroom, their own kitchen. Okay, a lot of space. Now, at first, everybody would cry, oh, they're settling in Gaza. Then, at peace, they would need to return this settlement, right? So Gazans return to live, whoever returns to live, in structures that are architectured already for individual sovereignty. So even if they try, I don't know what to do for these people, the structure is not built to traffic. Too much light and something that somebody tries to open something to underground or this or that sparks light to the entire city, above and below, with cameras of the infrastructure underground, not of the people. Just somebody tries to break in, poof, gong for the entire house. Okay? Now, the architecture structure itself, enough light and enough, and the sound, that the sound of the wind is structured so that the nervous system regulates, is centered. If you enter a house and it was structured for individual sovereignty, it's also energy. Think about little children. They enter, if you travel with little children, they enter structure. Let's say they enter church. The ceilings are so high that it's almost scary. They feel small. I've had very bad feeling in most churches. Not all of them, but most. Don't ask me about synagogues. I don't enter synagogues. But I couldn't. I was in the pipe. They had synagogue where the women were the top floor, and it was included because the Nazis didn't look up. And basically, I couldn't go there. I couldn't. I felt it's too much for me. Um, and there's a difference then when people enter a space and something is already relaxed. The space almost calls to have actions that are sovereign. So definitely architecture is powerful. Considering the waves and frequencies and the temperature, Saturn is cold, Mars is hot. So a good balance. And those structures can definitely sustain us in time of peace. Can also be resilient. Okay, resilient to, let's say, shock waves or something like that. Or resilient to storms. Okay, so it's good balance of resilience, but also alignment. If we think about resilient structures, they're usually flexible. Think about Japan. They build houses that are flexible to sustain an earthquake. So flexibility is resilience. The other thing is just inflammation. When it comes to food and food supply, of course, food that is reducing inflammation, and also the salmon. How should I say that? If I have salmon and I have woods, I can make a meal. But if I have oil and I have no salmon, I would need another type of oil that has chamazolen, which is when they do CO2 production of essential oil with azolen. That blue thing is anti-inflammatory. I can also just eat well. But wood, you need to cut it a year in advance and so on and so forth. Drilling oil. Okay. Now again, I'm not saying, oh, we should go back to just chopping wood before enlightenment, chop wood after enlightenment. But first of all, if the weapon that nobody wants to drop will drop, we will go. I don't think we will even be chopping wood. And secondly, we have to prioritize nervous system supporting food. So the nervous system that doesn't create inflammation. The food that doesn't create inflammation. Sovereignty, sense of self. And that can sustain us a time of peace, because if in Hebrew we call it manot grav, it's basically the food that soldiers take with them. Okay, if they take with them the food that is actually nourishing. You see, when they go, let's say, I don't know, NATO soldiers at the Black Sea, more important for them to go fishing. There's no amount of pre-stored omega-3s that can sustain them, particularly not during the winter. You think the soldiers from the two frontiers will not make barbecue together, because they will. It's what they did in Second World War. They had to replace the soldiers. They began to shoot in the air. Um, what's more? More things that I can think about, because definitely wave, architecture, food supply. Eris is, of course, rocky land, but can also be barren land. This can bring a war strategy that we had saw in the Bolshevik Revolution. That was later, I think they did it later as well, which was the entire land. They burned the entire land. In Hebrew, we call it a damacharucha, which basically means they left no crops, so that people wouldn't be able to eat. When the Red Army withdrawn, it basically left nothing grows. So the enemy couldn't thrive on the loss or on the looted land. It's very likely to happen again. And but this time with radiation. But hey, if we think about the what is this cyclone V, in slow release that we have. I was traveling the bus, and then I was looking at the sky, and I said, "Well, if I had children, I would have to tell them that this is the sky." Our children being gaslit. Uh, Children ask, "What is this in the sky?" Will you tell them clouds? In byproducts of industrial revolution could be toxic. Not a shower doesn't make the soil or the people any cleaner. Um, it is basically chronic poisoning in small. Yeah, and some people. It was my idea, and then I trained them to think like that. Oh, and then finding out that outside those secret societies is actually not considered cool. And um, which is definitely the war challenge. Because the thinking is, okay, how do we loot, enslave, empower? They say, oh, we need United States to do that. But it's completely different thinking. And also, even when they think like that, eventually it generates the antidote, because people, and it is happening because the people are also sharing those type of thoughts. It's not just the elite. Mars in Aquarius. Of course, clothing. I think with clothing we have most of the innovation. Probably something that counters the radiation. But here is the thing. Saturn, Neptune here will not let us take too many shortcuts, which means we'll have to address the root of the problem. Else we can have loss of structures, soldiers, sovereign structures or seemingly sovereign structures. Even loss of individuality. So Saturn, Neptune here will not really let us, let's say, create antidote to radiation. It will simply create a loss. Unless we treat the root cause of radiation, which was violation of sense of self that created the people that would basically develop the weapon that would basically cause such damage. Uranus is between Taurus and Gemini. Right now Uranus is still in Taurus, Venus sign, fixed land, revolution in fixed land, but adjacency to Beta Persei. Wealth can only be accumulated if it is zero rape, else it becomes people turned into stone. So stone graves, bodies again, we get Beta Persei significations as dead bodies upon dead bodies, usually for its eclipse phases, only in societies where there was slavery and rape. And we see with Uranus waves of remembrance that Beta Persei is actually sensuality, love, wealth, all good things. But only in zero rape society. Venus, 5 degrees Pisces. Well, so the outer planets, Aries at the end of Aries. I talked about the cloning project, curating the wound around that. Now, here's the thing. Aries usually thinks survivalistic. If there is war, we will need this, we will need that. And, well, definitely, probably this is for good reason. So it's not about completely abolishing that mindset. But it is about, Neptune is what is missing. And where's the sovereignty that is missing? So, nuclear radiation is still a big star. Okay, Pluto, Saturn ruling Pluto conjoining Neptune. Oil, Pluto is oil. Oil and radiation. Somehow oil has a radiation effect. I don't know. I don't understand in the process of drawing and refining oil. It has a polluting effect, or it could cause some viral diseases to the nervous system and diseases of the mind. So it can be psychiatric, it can be, maybe it's the gas, but Neptune really points that there is a frequency, it changes the frequency somehow. maybe the way that they, with some radiation. It can also be toxins, but to me it looks like there is radiation, somehow radiation with that process that affects the mind. I don't understand in the process of, because Pluto is definitely oil. I don't know why. Waves that negate waves. Okay, good use for chaos theory in this war, but we're going to have to the way we were working with chaos theory in the 60s. Okay, with Pluto and Uranus conjoined, we need to shift our thinking, because now it is the bisextile. It's a different way to work with chaos more organically. What we are negating is basically the frequencies of the 60s. Because the 60s were learning chaos theory from fragmenting and controlling, and now we're trying to unify and be at the right frequency. So we're basically trying to unify what was fragmented. And it can be a dual system of throwing chaos at the chaos, or throwing chaos at the signals that were meant to enslave, and playing. You see, when we do protection, like let's say even smudging, okay, then we would use smudging like sage, or I don't mean to culturally appropriate anything. Let's say sage. But then we would also play nice sounds and dance and um, um, uh, burn something that like sweet grass or something that adds the good energy. Is to burn off the bad energy but add the good energy. For example, when we defend from spiritual boundary violation, we don't just say, oh, kill the rapist, but reignite the tantric union, reignite the tantric embodiment. It's not about, oh, kill the rapist, it's about reignite love that is actually love, and sexuality that is actually embodied. Sense of self based, a connection based on people that have a sense of self, self-trust based. Um, so it is transmuting what was rape based, and then we defend and bring love, defend, bring love. And this is also, if I try to, I don't know. Because it's about set boundaries, defend, but raise the frequency. We are focused on what we are building instead of what we don't want. Um, Uranus, Pluto, there is agreement between Uranus and Pluto. I think we will be able to navigate chaotic systems more organically. This is very potential for the nervous system, regulated through interference, not through interference. There's relaxing into relaxed nervous system. Neptune adds a relaxing into. There was a woman that was recovering from attempts of her husband to murder her, and I remember one thing she said to me, that it is relaxing into well-being.